Hi, Michael. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a professional writer, and I've worked in television and film and also fiction. And I've done a lot in theater as a director and an actor and a singer and that kind of thing. I do a lot of different things as a musician and some design and stuff like that. So,
I read your book, Necropolis. Um,
oh,
so I really like the idea of having like the combination of sort of the private eye and kind of science fiction and
right.
uh, everything all put together. I was wondering if you could talk maybe about how you came up with the idea and what your process was for like writing the book.
Sure, sure. Well, first off, I've always been a fan of noir films and noir fiction, crime fiction. And even though they were before my time a little bit, I loved the idea of them and the look of it and the hard-boiled detective and all that. Even though some of the conventions are a little sexist and not appropriate anymore, that stuff was real fun to me. And I was always a science fiction fan growing up. So from the very beginning, I read science fiction, and I was sending short stories into the science fiction magazines when I was 11, and that kind of thing. And when it came time to write my first book, I was still living in California at the time, writing for sitcoms. I believe it was Sybil at the time with Sybil Shepherd in the mid 90s. And I had written a screenplay based on a basic idea by somebody else and myself, and had written the entire thing originally based on that. And I wanted to, when I thought I'm going to write my first novel, because it was a new form, I thought, well, it would be safer to write a story that I really knew from beginning to middle and end, because it's easy to get lost in the middle of a book, And when I created the idea, I wanted to merge both the love of noir and the science fiction element. And specifically, I was inspired by one movie, a really old movie called DOA. I think Edmund O'Brien was in it, but in the movie, the man is poisoned by a slow-acting poison. Like it takes 3 days to finally kill him, and so he has to solve basically his own murder before he dies. And it's got a great opening scene where he walks into this police station, which in those days were these marble edifices, And he walks up to the front desk and says, "I'd like to report a murder." And the sergeant says, "Who?" And he says, "Me." And he dies at the end. He solves the murder and he dies. And I loved that premise. And I thought, how can that be turned into a science fiction idea? So that's kind of how the whole thing came about, where people are, there's a something, people are reviving from the dead, and he's solving his own murder basically. And it takes off into quite a larger conspiracy. So that was how that happened.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's a scary idea to think of, people coming back from the dead. And I imagine a lot of people thought some things were buried and then they literally come back to haunt them.
Well, yes. First of all, the fun aspect was, if I want, I could have Humphrey Bogart over there, or I could have, I could bring people back that are interesting, that might be interesting. I didn't want to overdo it. I didn't really do much of that. And because the world was turned upside down by this virus and this effect, they had sort of re-embraced a little bit more of a noir culture. And the other part that I loved was, I forget what it's called, futurism or some sort of thing, which is the past's version of the future. So the 1950s, where you'd see the flying cars and the robots and the cities that looked like, Oz or something like that. And I loved that. And I thought, oh, that could work really well into it using those sort of old elements. And when you have an idea that's so out there, I had to do a lot of research on aging and everything, because it's kind of a hard to believe idea. So you have to try to make it as legitimate as you possibly can. And of course, this was way before the zombie craze and everything happened, because they're not zombies, they're just revived. And then they're also kind of an underclass. They're discriminated against. Obviously, people are afraid of them. So all that worked its way in. And it's interesting because things that are standard dramatic elements now, AI and AI creatures and holographic people and all that kind of thing, I used in Smart Everything, Smart, that came to be. So I don't know, when people read it now, I wonder when they're thinking, oh, not this again. Wait a minute. That all was there then. So, but it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. One of my favorite books is, Robert Heinlein's, what is it? Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, yeah.
And, a lot of interesting things in that book, but one thing is about communications technology. They're still physically going to a particular machine in the house to like talk on the phone. It's a video phone, but still,
Yeah. I mean, science fiction has been both incredibly prophetic in some ways and not. And so for instance, the idea of the video phone, Dick Tracy was using a video watch. And I always wondered why, before recently, I thought, why didn't video phones, we had the technology, why didn't that ever catch on? People didn't really seem to want to use it. And I thought, well, would I, want to have my hair messed up and be in a pajama, at 8 o'clock in the morning answering the phone? Maybe that was why. But of course, things have changed quite a bit, with Zoom and everything. So sometimes the world's slow to catch up. And sometimes the world, if you think about all of the things, the creativity they used on Star Trek in 1967, sometimes just to make things easy, like, okay, we don't want to show a shuttlecraft landing on a planet every day, so we'll invent the transport or all those kinds of things. And that's the thing about science fiction. I think our imagination leads our creation. We believe something can happen or can be possible before we do it, and so. And I also think that's why one person's imagination can change things. Elon Musk is changing the way we think about what we can do in space travel and achievability and all that after decades of not. And it's just in the tradition of Henry Ford or and usually these personalities are people who have the money to do what they want often, so they don't have to try to convince a government or corporations, to go in on risky ventures. And the other thing is they just don't let the normal ideas of possible failure get in their way. There's some sort of, let's go do it, For instance, the difference between NASA and SpaceX, I think, is very much different in their approach. And I have to say that years ago, when the idea of private corporations getting into space work and achieving orbit and all that, I was really worried about that, because I was worried that the profit motive might compromise safety. Let's do everything as cheap as we can. And that, of course, hasn't really come to pass, at least not yet. And in fact, in some ways, you could say they've developed, certain things that actually are safer, and some of that, and it's because, if you were carrying satellites into space, you really don't want to crash a lot of rockets, because that's not, it's not going to do very well for your company. I don't know, but I think it's highlighted. And I'm old enough to have been a child to watch, the first man on the moon, and I've done a lot of, obviously, following through my whole life the space program and researching it and everything. And like many, it was disappointing to see the lack of interest and funding and all that kind of thing in NASA. And some of it, I think, is the fault of, I don't know, NASA or the government in not repeating and not letting us know over and over again, the general population that may not have the kind of love of it we do, just how many benefits to them happen through space exploration, through space stations and that kind of thing, in terms of technology and science and all that kind of thing. It's almost like a PR failure, because it feels like, what's the point of this? The standard argument is, we have enough problems on Earth to worry about, why should we be thinking about space? And but that incredible excitement and pride that happened when we landed on the moon, and we, at that time, NASA had that Elon Musk sensibility. We sent men up in tin cans, with computers that aren't as smart as our phones now. It's kind of incredible, the risks that were taken, because there was a motivation. We were in a space race, and I don't know if you've ever seen that new TV series. I think it's called For All Mankind.
Yes.
Where it's an alternate reality where that continues because the competition continues. That's a very interesting alternate timeline and extrapolation of if we had the motivation to keep going. And while someone like Musk, his eccentricities or his, but also his passion, and he gets ahead of himself, maybe, I'm not sure I believe we're going to be on Mars as quickly as he thinks, but however that's happened, he's not single-handedly responsible for this interest in it, but I think in some way it's reinvigorated things. And NASA as a bureaucracy, like any bureaucracy, they're not only subject to the whims of their funding, which has never been very good, and the bureaucracy getting things accomplished, but it's easy to start thinking inside the box all the time and taking risks. And Musk's approach of, well, let's build it and launch it, and if it crashes, we'll figure out why it crashed, and then we'll build another one. NASA working everything out on paper for a gazillion years on tiny little things, to be safe. And it's kind of a wild way to approach things, but it's achieved things quicker. And it doesn't mean he hasn't had his setbacks, or these other companies will eventually catch up, I think, and provide different options. And then it's sad to see NASA over there using the same, I'm nothing against Boeing and all those companies and everything, but the same contractors. It just seems like something's in there that causes the problems they've had with their new launch system and rockets over and over and over again. I think it's part of the same problems that they got bogged down in over the years. And it's not for a lack of vision. They're probably very frustrated, but I read somewhere that there's a little bit of sort of resentment inside the culture of SpaceX, but at the same time, it's benefiting them very well. And so it's to see people excited about it to some degree again. And some of it is getting to watch it, watching those rockets take off over and over and over and over again, and of course, Elon Musk, once he gets the satellites up, he'll probably end up being a Bond villain who uses mind control over us or something. But
Might take over or something.
I'm sorry.
I said he might take over Twitter or something, and really All the
Well, yeah, and again, it's sometimes it's overreaching and it's doing things. It was the same thing with Tesla. It failed for quite a long time, and there are always questions. It poses questions to our society about what we want and what's good. The idea of a self-driving car, I thought, was just a disastrous idea. And the first couple times I rode in a friend's Tesla, which is not fully self-driving, I thought I'd be scared to death. And then I thought, this is when it decides, when a car is merging next to it and it can decide whether to slow down or speed up, I thought, wow, that's probably better than I could do. On the other hand, it has it's had its problems. So, but we have to decide the kind of risks we want to take. And astronauts know the risks they're taking, and they're all in. And we should know, like anything, we should compare it to the risk taken in any great endeavor. That it's going to happen. We're going to lose people. We're going to have setbacks, and the determination to push past that, and the ability to articulate why it's so important. Why? Okay, we're going to get to Mars. We're going to have these little things. We're going to learn how, what the rocks were like and all that kind of thing. Again, it's about articulating why it's so important. And I don't know. I think maybe to some people, seeing how fast climate change has happened. I mean, this stuff is happening faster in a real way than even the most conservative scientists thought, And well, maybe this idea of it's really important to make sure humanity is not just on this planet is not so crazy an idea, right? So to me, it's very exciting. I hope I live long enough to see us on another planet. And I only have one item on my bucket list, and it's to see Earth from space, because there's not one person, it seems like, who ever went up there who didn't come back realizing we got to work together all the same. It fundamentally changed their perspective. So anyway.
You mentioned, we need to be able to articulate the value and purpose for going to space and space exploration. If you had to explain that to somebody, how would you do it?
Well, first I would use examples, which I'm actually probably right now at the top of my head can't come up with some. I've read articles about it, but the things that affect them in a very real way. I think, smartphone technology, communications technology, especially health and science that affect them in terms of their own health and that kind of thing, how we as organisms interact, with the world. All of those things, I'd find the things that they could personally relate to, both in terms of convenience and the things that come to. I just taught a playwriting class at YSU with like a Gen Z, a very young. I never felt old. I always felt like I caught up until this group, and I really had to change my techniques. But these generations that grow up, with technology in their hands, have never seen anything else. It's harder to convince in a way that, that, hey, this wouldn't have happened. Let me tell you about when telephones were attached to the wall, and even before answering machines, if you missed a call, people just waited and called you back, and somehow civilization and business still worked, but anyway, so that's how I would do it. I would try to find real world examples and then extrapolate about what can come next. What's the possibility to come next? Are we going to find whatever, a cure for this, a way to treat this, and that kind of thing. So that's for the most resistant people to spending money and the imagination and the desire, to go into space. I think you sort of appeal to their self-interest, which is fine. And then imagination and pride, the moment of pride that happened when we landed on the moon, I think was less than, hey, we beat the Russians, than, oh my God, look what we can do, look what we can do. And anything's possible. And I think that is extremely important, for our civilization, especially when we're facing really big, daunting tasks that seem insurmountable. And it's like, no, we've always found a way around it, no matter how hard it is. So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think Neil Armstrong said that, during his worldwide tour, he would visit places in like India and China and other places. I'm not sure about China, but in India for sure, where he got the sense that everybody felt like they had made it to the moon. It was something that we as humanity had done. It wasn't, the Americans had done or them specifically, but it was a human accomplishment.
Yes, absolutely. And thank God we didn't get up there and say, America, 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 we're the best. I mean, we planted an American flag, but the iteration was, for all mankind. I'm sure Khrushchev or whoever was over there was, not as happy as everybody else. But, it's, and I think going back to the moon will help and reinstill that. And, there are major obstacles in terms of long-term space travel, which the space station has helped us learn quite a bit about. And, our bodies and brains existing in zero G for a long period of time, and, radiation and all that kind of thing. But we'll find ways around it. And I hope that going to Mars is such a huge, more difficult task. I hope if there's a much greater chance of a real failure, and loss of life, even after because they'll probably send, equipment and stuff like that ahead of time. But I hope if that happens, we keep going, and say, okay, that's part of the game. We're gonna keep going, We vaccinated a lot of people with crazy stuff that killed them before we figured out how to cure stuff. So, and I think the pride that happens there is, anyway.
Yeah, it should be good. You were talking about technological spin-offs as being a justification for expending money on space exploration. And I've kind of wrestled with this question, and I wanted to get your take on it. Do we explore to innovate, or do we innovate to explore?
I think we do both. And if we don't have the desire or passion or inspiration to explore, those innovations may not have happened. That's a really good question. I think they both happen, and it may be innovation to explore provides more benefit than the other way around. I mean, I really don't know, but I never thought about that. But that's pretty darn important. And again, I think it's rethinking everything. When you see the suits and the insides of capsules of, like the SpaceX capsules with the touch screens and everything, and you think back to 2001, The Space Odyssey, which blew my mind and still does. I can't believe how good it still looks. And some of the stuff they had, it got a lot of stuff right. It got some stuff wrong, but that's fantastically exciting, and also real people going up there. Space tourism may not end up being quite as lucrative for a long time. But it was really smart sending William Shatner into space. It was really, really smart, but all of those things reinvigorate that sense of imagination, and so and I think that science fiction and writing and speculative writing does, our minds go first before our bodies do, whether, for whatever reason. And that's really interesting too. It's almost like we create our future before it happens, And so I hope it continues.
Now, I think that's very important. Star Trek for a long time had been, really big force in popular culture. Even if you're not a fan of the show, you knew about it and kind of had a sense of what it was about. And it really portrayed sort of a positive future, where technology played a positive role, and something that kind of created a common vision for all of us to work towards. Now, in our current kind of situation, we have such fragmented kind of visions. Everybody can have their own vision. We have like millions and millions of visions. And a lot of them are actually dystopians, like inevitably the world's going to fall apart, and, it's going to be not good for most of us. And I was just wondering, do you see a way to reverse that trend, to create like a common positive vision similar to what Star Trek did?
Well, it's interesting, and retroconning Star Trek in future stories. It started in the original, they attribute the things that brought humanity finally together, where it was another world war and recovery from that, and first contact. The idea that we're not alone, and it changed everything, They claim within 50 years, everything, poverty and everything was gone. I'm not sure it really happened that fast, but certainly adversity that happens in a global way eventually, I think, brings people together. Right now, working together on and global warming is not working so well. But for instance, this summer, what's going on in Europe right now, and what's going on, if we see a lot of changes this fast, I think people are going to rethink that. However, human beings, there's never been a form of human government that hasn't eventually collapsed and failed, including democracies or countries. And we're moving in the right direction. I think that everything takes longer than people think. And it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing that we're still so far behind in racism and sexism and prejudice in so many ways at all, but sometimes it takes many generations for change to happen in terms of us being together in worldview and all that kind of thing. And the internet and the idea that everyone does have an opinion. And I think the idea that every opinion is valid is a little dangerous, in the sense that I don't want to discount your opinion about something, but if you have no information about it, if you have no education about it, then, what should I think about it? And also the opinions are connected with the idea of self-worth, which I think is disagreeing about an idea or having an argument is not necessarily a negative thing. I'm not saying you have no right to exist just because I don't agree with you, right? And people's sense of identity gets so tied up in this, that, well, it's happening right now. Political parties are so polarized they can't seem to, to treat each other with respect, let alone come up with compromise. And so if something terrible happens, we'll learn from it. eventually. Hopefully it won't. But I do think that inspirational leaders and people who find solutions for these things can help. And it takes a lot of courage. And we unfortunately, politics does not foster courage, really. It's sort of always the oddball who just doesn't care. And there's negative things about that. Elon Musk trying to buy Twitter, you're like, oh, but I don't know. I think eventually we will come together, and there's always the possibility of it not happening. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, these telescopes and everything, the more we see what's out there and the more we're learning, just learning there are so many planets, our imaginations took us out to all kinds of species. They all kind of look like us with different brows, in Star Trek. But it increases the odds so much, and the size of the universe. That's the start of thinking about that and thinking out there, and the taking the UFO phenomena seriously right now is forever. How it turns out is a positive thing. I never thought I would see it. I always loved UFOs and stuff, and I don't have I have a wait and see what it is kind of opinion on it, but I wasn't like ignore it and call these people kooks. And I think that may also be the result of starting to think, what, we need to rethink space. We need to think about what the possibilities are out there, because the odds are increasing as we see that, and it's just fascinating.
It is. I wanted to ask you about when you saw the moon landings, what kind of effect did that have on you? And how has your view of that changed as the decades since then have unfolded?
To see it, especially as a young person, and I think it happened for everyone. The whole world that had a TV set was glued to their TV set. It was, and as you said, it was a success, a monumental, almost unconceivable success for the whole species. And I think part of that was, it had nothing to do with, oh, we're going to get all these benefits out of being on the moon, a couple moon rocks and things like that. It was, we did it. Look what we did. When we decided to do it, look what we did. And look how fast we did it, And that idea of anything's possible, and pride in human achievement. And when we put our minds to something, what can happen? That certainly affected me very greatly. And, I also watched Robert Kennedy get assassinated live on television, you know what I mean? And so you learn both sides of it. But my sense of optimism and excitement about what we can achieve, I think, started there and has continued. And it was disappointing. I couldn't understand for decades. I mean, I knew why. I knew why governments weren't interested in spending money and didn't understand the value. But seeing NASA not be one of the most important things, and learning that what being really put in the back was very, very disappointing for a long time, And the fact that it's taken all this time just to sort of get back going was too bad, I thought. And So we'll see what happens. I hope this is the beginning of something that continues to sustain itself, because the next steps are much harder. You know, that's why I love that series, you know, For All Mankind. That idea, you know, they went off and put a base on the moon like right away, whether they knew how to do it or not. Then they went and did, you know, and that gutsiness, and unfortunately it was continued, and also the ramifications in this show it had on you know, race and sex and all of that kind of thing. That was a real smart way to do it, how it changed the culture much more quickly. So anyway, yeah. So I think that eventually we will come together. There are big obstacles. I think education is one of the most important things, education. And I think that if you don't have a good education to begin with as a child, and you're not instilled with that ability to hope for the future, then it's real easy to start to gravitate toward more rational stuff, more extremist stuff, you know, because as human beings, we all feel insecure. We all feel at times not valued and respected. We all feel some sense of being mistreated, and some people are definitely more mistreated than others. And there are positive ways to fix those things. And if they're not addressed, then the ways they get fixed is through anger and violence and conflict and all that kind of thing. And so, but if you don't know anything about anything, if you don't, you know, you don't know about history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? And so I think that's the first step. That I mean, my mom was a teacher, and teachers should be paid like doctors. You know, if teachers were, you know, if we had the best and brightest there, and we invested in all that kind of thing, however it would happen in the poorest places and all that, I think that would change things for one. So I know that one teacher can, you know, I talked about how one person can change things. In 5th grade, we all had to write a story. And I have it right there. Wait a second. I still have it. It was The Terrorizing Monster.
Oh, that's
I wrote it in 5th grade.
Is this a copy of it?
Well, this is it. And the teacher liked it so much, she took it home and typed it up and bound it sort of in this plastic thing. And she put it in the class's library. You know, they had a little library. And that was it. I was a writer. You know, one teacher, you know, giving me a little extra affirmation, right? And you know, that's all it takes. You know, that's why I try to, you know, teach writing and give back and be positive myself, because you know.
That is have you reconnected with that teacher?
No, it was her first year out of student teaching, and unfortunately I haven't reconnected with her. Should me draw my own illustrations. And that's too bad, because I would have liked to have thanked her. I have reconnected with other teachers down the road that were very supportive in one way or another to say thank you. And it was very different then. You know, I went back and did something at my high school recently, and I mean, it's like a prison in the sense that, you know, the security and what you have, you know, the rules and all that, which I understand and are valid, but I feel like it doesn't give the administrators and the teacher enough time to think about what they need to think about. They have to be thinking about, you know, all that other stuff. And, you know, hopefully hopefully that'll all get better.
So where do you see humanity in 200 years?
Man, it's really hard to predict because there's two major scenarios. If we don't get it together and we can't come together and things fall apart, and it's because, I remember when I was a kid, I had a pickle jar. I love pickles. And I dropped the pickle jar on the patio in the backyard, and it broke. And and I cried because it was the first time it really hit me. There are things you cannot undo, and global warming there is a point where it's not fixable anymore, and so the one scenario is part of New York is underwater and things are really bad, and in 200 years we aren't in space and we haven't come together, or we do find a way. Those challenges serve as impetuses to come together and move forward, right? So it's an either or proposition. I kind of don't see a middle of the road situation. We're really at a pivotal point in human history, with the health of our planet, and we've reached this technological point where we can do so much. If we use it the right way, and we get out there, and the profit motive is in a way not a bad thing. They know how much the minerals and precious metals and things on asteroids are worth out there. That's a really good reason to develop the technology, get out there and get those, So I really can't say. The hopeful side of myself says we have a Star Trek future where we get it together and get out there. And who knows? There may be another idea. There may be another. My imagination is not past the point where I don't write off the idea that we do have some sort of first contact, or we do just even learn about the possibility or the likelihood of intelligent life developing elsewhere, and how that would change things. So that's my answer to that.
You could take a trip to space, would you?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I'd risk my life in a second. Seeing the Earth from space or even from orbit, and I don't think, with my age and my back and everything, I don't know how much help I'd be in terms of actually missions and things. But if they're smart, they'll bring creators and thinkers out there with them, and not just scientists eventually, or they'll bring people who can do both. I think it's really, really important, to get there and go, not just how do we make our waste recycling better, but, what can we do? What can we do? So.
But let's you or one of your descendants actually immigrates to Mars, and it's 200 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And her great granddaughter, she's in high school now in history class, doing a project on the 2020s. What hope happens this decade that would be worth remembering in 200 years?
Well, certainly the reinvigoration of space travel, and I believe there'll be a growing understanding of the value of it and the inspirational value of that. I think that will be something that will be a major thing. I also think that a tipping point in conflict and inability to come together will be a major thing. And it's not just political and social and culture, it's also religious, It's how do we figure out, to work together with such different points of view. And so this is the start of that, I think, one way or another. And also what we did to our planet and what we did to save our planet or not. So I think those will be the things. I do think we'll go to Mars. I talked about good or bad. No matter what happens, I do think we'll go to Mars, and I do think it's sustainable. And I think that that hopefully will be a massive shift in thinking. Even more than the moon landing was. And so we'll see. I mean, every major scientific achievement we've had has given us great pride and all the way across, like you said, so that's what I think.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate your time this morning and being part of my project. And I think this is definitely we'll make it to Mars. I feel like sooner than later, actually. I think this decade is possible.
I hope so. I hope, NASA has ambitious plans and it keeps, I just hope it doesn't keep getting pushed back. But I also think there's pressure being exerted, by SpaceX and stuff like that. That is good. There's positive pressure, and I think you're right. I think we'll get there. And I really want to be alive for that. Keep my fingers crossed. I want kids to see that. That'll change kids a lot, right? So,
Yes,
so anyway, thank you. I really appreciate having the chance to talk to you.
Yeah, same here. Okay, well, you have a good rest of your day then.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.